11:58 a.m. Central Time. The hatch to the International Docking Adapter has been opened. Taking a few pictures inside, still some work to do until they get to the hatch of the Crew Dragon. But in the meantime, a major milestone. Towards the camera the most, you see David St. Jacques looking over, Commander Expedition 58 Commander Oleg Kononenko on the right, wearing protective gear in case there are any foreign objects or debris. She has goggles you may be seeing here in a minute, is NASA's Anne McClain. Right now conducting a survey of the inside between the pressurized mating adapter where the 3 crew members are right now and through the hatchway to the International Docking Adapter. Just conducting a survey, making sure everything is okay. Once they confirm these next steps, they'll be able to perform the next major milestone, which will be the hatch opening of the Crew Dragon, right on the other side of that open hatch right now.
At step 4.1, the APAS hatch is open. There was no sign of warp, no condensation. There was a little bit of dust in the air initially. That's all we observed.
Copy all.
This is Mission Control Houston. You just heard David St. Jacques, flight engineer of Expedition 58, astronaut of the Canadian Space Agency, providing a little update on what's on the other side of the hatch there. Nothing too major, just a little bit of dust, but otherwise pretty clear. Astronauts continuing to conduct the survey. You can see some of the flashes of the camera at the hands now of NASA's Anne McClain. NASA's Anne McClain in the back there, you can see with the headlamp. David St. Jacques providing a mounted light at the hatchway between the pressurized mating adapter and node 2. Provide a little bit of extra light into the International Docking Adapter area. Again, Anne McClain wearing the protective gear just in case of any foreign objects. Recently, David St. Jacques reported minimal dust, but otherwise pretty clean. After conducting the survey and wrapping up with any photography taken during this time, the next major milestone will be to open another hatch that's beyond this one that you're seeing right now. That is the hatch of the Crew Dragon, currently docked to the forward end of the International Space Station. Docking time for that vehicle was 4:51 a.m. Central Time. This is Mission Control Houston. If you're just joining us, 3 Expedition 58 crew members about to open the hatch of the Crew Dragon. The hatch currently open between the pressurized mating adapter, where you see David St. Jacques on the left and Oleg Kononenko on the right, and McClain inside the International Docking Adapter. Joining us now is Dan Hewitt. Joining us now, Dan and Tom from Hawthorne, California at SpaceX's Mission Control. Let's hear some updates from their end on the updates, the latest updates of the Crew Dragon and what's to expect for these procedures as the crew begins to head towards opening the hatch and actually going inside. Dan and Tom.
All right, thanks, Gary. And yeah, we're watching along from here too. Thanks for taking us from docking to where we are now. And yeah, we got one hatch open. We got one more to go. So obviously, that second hatch being opened is the one we're really looking for when we get the hatch open and the crew can actually start going inside a Dragon.
Yeah, it's been a very exciting night here at SpaceX headquarters on Hawthorne. We're all very much anticipating this second hatch opening. As you can see on your screen right here, this is a view from inside the International Space Station. And the crew right now is kind of huddled in the pressurized mating adapter. They currently have the hatch between that PMA and the International Docking Adapter open. And they're currently just doing the final checks before they open the second hatch, which is in the top of Crew Dragon.
Yeah, and if anybody has been tuned in, we're expecting that potentially in the next 5 minutes or so. The crew is just going to have to do some final checks, and then we'll be ready to go. So that hatch opening could come as early as 4:50 a.m. Pacific time. Sorry to keep jumping around on time zones, but we are in different parts of the country as all the teams are working together. But it could be coming in just about 5 minutes from now.
Pretty shortly, the crew in the space station is going to be donning some protective gear. This is just a precaution, as this is the first time that the Dragon spacecraft has docked with the International Space Station. It's a precaution to make sure that there's no particulates in the air or anything that happened between the ascent and docking. So you might be seeing them donning some masks right before they open that hatch.
That's right. And one of the first things they'll do is they'll actually go in and take an air sample reading just before the actual air and Dragon mixes with the air on board the space station. So they'll pop in real quick and take those air samples and then come back and just compare everything.
Go ahead, Ann. Just put a couple photos on SSC-13. I just noticed two pieces of FOD on the Dragon hatch on the outside. One of them just looks like a small piece of string or rope that's on the hatch label. The second one is about 1.5 inches, and it looks, what it appears as is a kind of clear plasticky type of material. But I put some photos on SSC-13. Okay, copy the two items that you've noticed, and then them being on SSC-13, and we'll get those pulled down.
And so just there, NASA astronaut Ann McLean, so she reported she saw two pieces of FOD. That's an acronym, that's Foreign Object Debris. And that's basically any object or any piece of material that isn't necessarily expected to be there.
Happy to report that the initial look through the window, everything looks great. Ripley and Earth both look like they enjoyed their trip up here, and I see no signs of any off-nominal undetected events. Great stuff.
You just heard that sounds like they're getting a good look through the window in the hatch of that Dragon 2. They were able to see Ripley and the zero-G indicator inside there, I think. Looks like everything looks nominal from their point of view. Hopefully they'll get a first-hand look once they get that hatch open. The Dragon 2 hatch does have a window mounted right in the center, and that's the crew can, during docking operations, if they were inside, would be able to look straight outside and verify with their own eyes, if they needed to, that the docking was proceeding nominally. Tough to see that window right now just because of the geometry of the pressurized mating adapter, but looks like they're able to get a good look.
Yeah, again, once the crew gets the hatch open, the first thing they'll do is go in and take a couple of air samples, and they'll come back. They'll leave the hatch open and come and compare those air samples to basically just the background samples that they get from inside the space station. That's one of the interesting things about being in microgravity is there's no natural convection. So the atmosphere inside the Dragon capsule, even though you open up the hatchway, as long as the pressures are pretty much the same, the air's not going to start mixing until we actually engage some active measures. They have a bunch of fans throughout the entire space station just to actively move the air, because if you were to just sit in a cabin in microgravity, the air wouldn't move on its own. That's one of the things that they would always talk about. Some of the crew members would, if you stay in one place and you're constantly breathing out, you'll kind of get a bubble of CO2 around you as you're exhaling. So it's always good for them to move around. But so they're going to open up the hatch and take those air sample readings, and then once everything checks out okay, they kick on the fans and they actually start circulating all of the air inside of Dragon with that of the rest of the space station. So Dragon already drawing on power from the station, and pretty soon going to be sharing its oxygen and its atmosphere too.
It's kind of crazy, all these things we take for granted here on Earth in the presence of gravity, so changed by the lack of it on orbit. Now we're getting some views right now past the astronauts into that international docking adapter. This was the vestibule that Dan and I had been talking about earlier. What's interesting is that the place where they're kind of poking their heads into just a few hours ago was exposed to the vacuum of space, and now been pressurized up after a hard capture of the Dragon capsule.
And one of the usual questions that people will ask astronauts is, does space have a smell? And a lot of them will tell you the first time you open up a hatch to a new vehicle, or when crew members come back inside after a spacewalk, they do report space having a smell. They usually say it smells almost like burnt metal. Some believe that might be the atomic oxygen, which is out in the environment, but they might be smelling that right now, because the area that they're in, where they're basically inside the international docking adapter now, was just exposed to space a couple hours ago.
They're right up next to that blinking strobe light that we saw right now on the it's mounted right in the center of that Dragon hatch that we watched come ever so closely during those docking maneuvers.
And again, just 3 crew members right now on board the space station. It's the Expedition 58 crew. They're led by a Russian cosmonaut, Oleg Kononenko, who's at the bottom of the camera, kind of floating in and out. In the center of your camera is NASA astronaut Anne McClain, and further along in the pressurized mating adapter, right up against the hatch, is a Canadian astronaut, David St. Jacques.
There you can see a straight shot through that pressurized mating adapter, and then the international docking adapter, and then you can actually just make out a little bit of that Crew Dragon hatch that will soon be opening.
Are the crew gracious enough to give us a bit of a zoom there? There it is. There's the hatch.
It's worth noting that the pressurized mating adapter is actually how the space shuttle also docked with the International Space Station.
Station on 2, step 5.7. We're ready for final Dragon hatch equalization.
Checking.
And so Anne McClain calling down. The crew just about done with their steps, so the teams on the ground are going to check it out, make sure everything is equalized between Dragon itself. So again, you want to make sure that the pressure inside the spacecraft and inside the space station are the same. Otherwise, opening the hatch could either be really difficult or a little more dynamic than you might want. So always a good idea, and always the last thing that they do, just to make sure these pressures are equal.
Equalization time. We're still looking into it. We're seeing Dragon temperatures just a little bit higher than expected, so we should have that for you shortly.
Copy.
As Dan mentioned, we're just now waiting for the crew aboard the space station to verify that everything is good inside that Dragon capsule. It's in contact with the capsule via the umbilicals.
And the expected equalization time would be 2 minutes or less.
Be 2 minutes or less.
As you just heard, it sounds like equalization may be complete as early as 2 minutes from now. But we're getting all that. They're getting Dragon telemetry via those umbilicals that plugged in shortly after hard capture, and they're able to monitor all of the telemetry channels coming out of Dragon, which includes things like air cabin temperature and pressure, humidity, presence of any other things inside the air. And by monitoring those, they can make sure that the pressure and temperature are at appropriate levels to open that hatch.
And just a quick handover. We'll get that video communication back with the station momentarily. We should have a pretty solid block coming up, so as long as everything continues to move along quickly, we're going to have great views of that hatch open. Everything gone well ahead of the timeline so far today. Docking was early.
It's great news.
Yeah, the crew's been moving through all of these steps really quickly and should get the hatch open early as well.
On your screen right now, you can see the two mission control centers currently watching over the operations on orbit right now. On the left is Johnson, and on the right is mission control at SpaceX, where Dan and I are right now.
Yep. We can't wave from that camera view, but yeah, we're just over top overlooking them, and those teams have been working hand in hand pretty much since the vehicle launched. Things really kicking off with what we call integrated operations, and that was just about when we went on the air earlier today before the docking, which is about 2.5 hours or so before the actual docking to the space station. And that was just when everything's really in lockstep between the two teams, sending to Dragon and making sure that the station's ready to receive it. But everything went real smoothly. We went through all the demos, had no issues the whole way up, and actually docked ahead. And she's just reporting that the crew is just about ready. And so we should hopefully be getting that hatch opening coming real soon. Trying that, so the ground is still looking for the pressures to all equal out. And then as soon as that looks good, they'll be ready to press forward. But again, I think hatch opening was originally supposed to be about 45 minutes from now. So we are still well ahead of our timeline for the day.
Now, once they open the hatch, we're still not done. There's still a lot more tests to run to make sure that Crew Dragon is safe to enter and make sure that everything looks nominal. We will actually right now seeing some live views inside the Crew Dragon spacecraft right there. You can see Ripley sitting over in the far left seat, and of course the zero gravity indicator, which has taken a liking to that footrest on the closest seat to the screen.
Which this has me really excited, because anybody who's followed a lot of space station operations over the years, I can't remember a time we've had the view from inside the spacecraft that just docked as the hatch gets open. So this is going to be really cool to see the hatch come open from this perspective, what the astronauts will actually be seeing when they're sitting inside this vehicle, and we'll be able to see the space station crew come through.
You can imagine seeing a time lapse of this footage from launch, when they close the side hatch of the Dragon to load all the cargo in, and then fast.
And it's going to be a fairly quick trip, about 5 days attached to the space station. Dragon did deliver a little over 400 pounds of cargo packed away underneath the seats there. Some of that, some crew supplies, so things like food and clothing for the crew. Probably even some clothing for some upcoming crew members. So we have 3 new astronauts set to launch less than 2 weeks from now on a Soyuz rocket out of the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan. But the crew will be responsible, obviously, for unpacking all of that cargo. One of the things that is included in there are some cold
at
bags.
this time, we are ready for you to pick back up in the procedure. In 6.1, you have a go to proceed with mask donning, and we'll be standing by for the comm check.
Copy. In work.
So this is a view from, or we just had a view from the exterior. You could see exactly where it was attached to the space station. But yeah, on the right-hand side of your screen, you got inside on one side of the hatch, inside the International Space Station. On the left-hand side of your screen, the other side of the hatch. Can't wait to see those 2 views merge with crew members passing through. So on the right-hand side of your screen, inside the space station, you can see those crew members donning those protective masks, just as a precaution as they enter the Dragon spacecraft. This is the first time that the Crew Dragon has docked at the space station, so it doesn't hurt to have as much caution as possible.
Yep. With NASA, we're definitely always about caution, especially since we're ultimately responsible for the lives of these crew members when they're on board, and not expected to have any issues inside, but the crews will go in just to make sure. They'll take a couple of quick atmospheric readings, and then they'll come back inside the space station. The Dragon hatch will stay open. They'll come back inside of the space station, compare it to just background readings in another lab. And then once that's all good, they'll get the go to actually begin mixing the atmosphere and turn on those fans to start that motion between Dragon and the space station. I think the expected choreography is David St. Jacques should be the first one through the hatch. We'll see if that holds. But he's the one on the right there, and he again is the Canadian astronaut currently on board the space station. In the middle there is Oleg Kononenko, a Russian cosmonaut, and the current Expedition 58 commander. And then Anne McLean over on the left there, the NASA astronaut on board. So I think once they get all geared up, they'll be able to move through the final portion of actually opening up this hatch.
Once the hatch is open and the crew members are able to get those air samples, Dan and I will be continuing our coverage all the way until the air is determined to be good to go, and they're able to start mixing the atmosphere. And then we do expect, hopefully, a statement from those astronauts later in the morning. We will be here with you the entire time.
Nowhere else I'd rather be right now.
Exactly.
Well, except maybe up there opening the hatch.
So it looks like a pose for one final picture before they go in. They're looking great up there.
Houston, station 1-2, comm check.
That is a good comm check. And can you confirm that you can hear both Oleg and David in their epicas?
Yes, we have good communication between crew members.
All right, you are go to proceed. You have a go in step 7.1.
All right, and so with that go, and you heard 7.1, so that's the next step in their procedures, and that's for them to actually go in and start opening up the hatch. 7.1 is to move in close to the hatch. 7.2 is to open the hatch, so we are right there. So everyone keep an eye out. We should see that hatch opening momentarily. Again, you're going to see Oleg and David up at the hatch and hanging back in node 2.
Hopefully on the left-hand side of the screen, inside the Dragon capsule, we might be able to see some of that hatch open activity.
Yeah, it's really unique to have this perspective to have from both sides. So standing by for hatch open.
Houston, station, Dragon hatch opened at 13:07.
Copy.
And there you have it. Dragon hatch is open. Ann McClain made the call. It was 5:07 a.m. Pacific. I think 8:07 a.m. Eastern time. I'm doing some quick math in my head, and that's the International Space Station and Dragon docked together, flying over the northern Atlantic, about 255 statute miles in the air. So the Dragon hatch is open. You can see an arm reaching in.
This is the very first time that humans have been on orbit inside of a Dragon 2 capsule. Or any, oh, excuse me, not any Dragon, oh, Dragon 2 capsule.
All right, again, so it looks like David St. Jacques, he's going to be the first one through. He's going to take some quick atmospheric readings. He's using a device that we have over on the U.S. side. There he is, David inside of Dragon. Human beings inside the Dragon spacecraft.
You might hear some cheers here from SpaceX headquarters in Hawthorne. This is just an incredible sight for the SpaceX team to see these ISS crew members inside the capsule.
And so they're going to use these two separate devices, David using one and Oleg Kononenko using another. And it takes them a couple of minutes usually for the sample readers to gather what they need. And then they'll move back outside of Dragon. And again, just compare this to the generic background readings that we have inside of another module on board the station. They should be heading over to the Destiny module, just basically two doors down from Dragon now. And they'll compare that, and then once everything looks good, the teams expect to wait about half an hour, and then they'll start mixing the air between Dragon and the International Space Station. Our zero-G indicator getting a little bump there.
He is now free to move about the cabin.
And again, if you're just now joining us, the hatch is open inside of the Dragon spacecraft. Right now, 2 of the crew members from Expedition 58 are inside, just taking some atmospheric readings. It's Oleg Kononenko from the Russian Space Agency, Roscosmos, and David St. Jacques from the Canadian Space Agency. Once they get what they need, they'll move back outside, compare the results to some readings just from another module on board the station. You can actually see one of them. So the cargo that Dragon delivered is just underneath the seats. There's about 400 pounds, a little over 400 pounds in total.
You can see them inspecting some of those cargo bags down there.
Oh. Can you tell we're in microgravity?
It's been indicated.
All right, again, if you're just now tuning in, you're seeing human beings inside of the Crew Dragon spacecraft. It's David St. Jacques and Oleg Kononenko from Expedition 58. They're already moving some of the cargo around. They're in there taking some atmospheric readings. That hatch was opened at 5:07 a.m. Pacific, 8:07 a.m. Eastern, while the station was flying just about 255 statute miles over the northern Atlantic. Getting our split screen view back. So the one on the left, that camera is inside of Dragon. That camera on the right is inside of Node 2, looking down the pressurized mating adapter into the Dragon spacecraft. Hatch open.
That white box moving around inside the international docking adapter right there is one of the pieces of cargo that Dragon took up. As Dan said, that cargo is stored down below the crew area, below where the seats are. And it looks like they are already transferring some of that cargo out. A while ago, we talked about the differences between docking and berthing. One of the big advantages of docking, obviously, is that it's autonomous and the spacecraft itself can initiate and complete the process. But the hatch size is a lot smaller because of those necessary docking equipment. They're all around the edge of the hatch.
Yeah, you can actually get a really easy comparison with this view. So obviously the docking hatch is that small circle you see way in the foreground. This square shape that you can see Anne McLean just at on the screen on the right, that is a common berthing mechanism. So when the cargo dragons arrive, that's what they ultimately get bolted to. So you can see just kind of how much more clearance that can give a vehicle. But that does require you to actually bolt or attach and then bolt the spacecraft to that mechanism. You can't just fly in and dock like Dragon did earlier this morning.
That's why it's important to have a healthy ecosystem of spacecraft that are capable of visiting the space station to transport both humans and cargo of various sizes.
Yeah, that's also why we use the pressurized mating adapter. That's In some of the external views, you've seen a large black structure that the Dragon is docked to, and that's essentially to turn a square hole into a circular hole. And that just allows you to change the type of docking adapter that you're able to put on there. It looks like we got some cargo coming out.
I know I've said it before, but hard to believe that thing was sitting on top of a Falcon 9 only 27 hours ago. And now they're transferring cargo out of the top hatch.
Station Houston on 2, and at this time we recommend that you set up the detectors, and David can help Oleg with the sample as needed.
Looks like they're already digging into some of that cargo that was brought up by the Crew Dragon.
Yeah, it looks like David St. Jacques there, close up to the camera on the right side. He's right now back in Node 2, the Harmony module, along with Anne McLean. Meanwhile, Oleg Kononenko still inside Crew Dragon. We should see him pop out in a little bit as soon as he's done getting that air sample.
And there he comes.
And moving back out.
Again, keeping that hatch open as the air won't readily mix by itself and without any gravity to help convection along.
Crew getting a chance to take a couple of photos is they're surely going to want to commemorate the moment too.
It's a little selfie action. Can't help that. I'd be doing the same thing.
All right, so the hatchway open again. It's going to take a little while for them to just do final ratings on all of the samples, and then the folks on the ground, actually over in Mission Control.
Houston Station, step 9.4. The detector CTV is retrieved. All crew are out of Dragon. We're currently in line forward.
Copy.
And so it sounds like the crew now back in the Destiny laboratory. You heard Anne McLean call down there in Lab Forward. That's the larger laboratory module on board the station. That's where a lot of the US-based experiments are housed. But they're going to go back there and now compare the air samples that they took inside of Dragon with just the background ones that they're able to get there in Destiny. And we're expecting it to take about 30 minutes or so until the teams on the ground are able to look through all the data, and then they get the go to actually begin the mixing of the atmosphere between the Dragon spacecraft and the International Space Station. Because as Tom and I both said, that doesn't just happen. Just because the hatch is open, the air inside of Dragon is not readily flowing inside of the station until we actually turn on some fans that make that process work. And that's just one of those quirks of living in microgravity. You have to actively move the atmosphere around inside.
Station Houston on 2 for Epcot timing. Want to let you know that we are tracking that they will have at least another 5 minutes remaining on them.
All right, so again, the crew is out of the hatch, and again, that hatch opened at 5:07 a.m. Pacific, 8:07 a.m. Eastern Time, with Station and Dragon docked together, flying just about 255 statute miles over the northern Atlantic. The crew now going and taking a few more samples, and then that gets downlinked in data to the ground, who then get a chance to look at it, and then they'll move forward with actually mixing all that air between Dragon and Station. And then shortly after that, we are expecting the crew to gather. And
Station from the lab, both readings indicate 0. We are looking at serial number 1001 and 1002.
We copy.
You're hearing the crew members relay down the results of those analyses to the ground controllers.
And Ann, in step 10.3, your max allowable will be 125.
Copy 125. Houston Station, step 11.2, ready for re-ingress.
And you are go.
all right, so we're continuing to move through all of the procedures to get all these atmospheric readings, and we should see Ann McLean, I believe, making her way down now. And she's back there in node 2 at the hatchway. One of our other crew members now back inside of Dragon. There are a couple of additional atmospheric detectors that were flown on the vehicle. And so per their procedures, they're expecting this to take about 3 minutes for those detectors to finish. And then that next step will be completed.
As Dan and I always say, slow and steady wins the race when it comes to bringing a new vehicle, or any vehicle really, to the International Space Station. All these tests are part of the validation of this first flight and the Crew Dragon capsule. And so right now those atmospheric readings are taking help to prove that the air inside Dragon 2 is safe after its ascent. All part of this prove-out process of this new vehicle for its maiden launch.
That's right. Demo 1, an appropriate name, as it is a demonstration, as we've talked about over the last couple of days and in briefings and all of our live shows. This is a demonstration because we need to kind of put the vehicle through the paces, make sure we catch anything and shake out all the kinks, because the next flight is the one, as Kirk Shireman said for record, that's the one where we're going to have crew members on board of Dragon. It's going to be 2 NASA astronauts, Doug Hurley and Bob Behnken, who were kind enough to stop by for a little while earlier. They've been here in Hawthorne watching all the operations unfold. They actually hopped on a flight. They were in Florida for the launch, got over here to watch everything unfold, and believe they should be back here to actually watch all of the splashdown operations a little bit later this week. Again, Dragon scheduled to stay docked for about 5 days, ultimately coming home for a splashdown on, I believe it's Thursday night, Friday morning, depending on where you are in the world. So a pretty quick mission, but a very important mission to get in the books. This the first flight of the commercial crew program to the International Space Station. So a really big milestone, obviously, and something that's been a lot of years coming. But everything gone very smoothly so far with this mission. Vehicle docked, the hatch open, the crew doing a couple of final readings, and then Dragon will pretty much be ready to be fully integrated into the International Space Station.